Begin with a gripping hook. I was standing in the university's cramped lecture hall, clutching a printed copy of my rainforest conservation proposal, when Dr. Hale clicked to the next slide and announced, "This breakthrough model for predicting canopy-level biodiversity is entirely my own work." My stomach dropped. The words felt like a slap, but the real sting came a second later when my mother's voice cracked through my phone. "You're an embarrassment to this family. Stop chasing fairy tales and get a real job." I could hear my father sigh in the background, the sound of disappointment settling like dust. In that moment, my idea stolen, my family's trust shattered, I knew I had to walk away from everything that had ever told me I belonged. The painful departure and relentless pursuit. I packed a duffel with clothes, a laptop, and a handful of field notebooks, then bought a one-way ticket to the edge of the Appalachian foothills where a disused research station sat abandoned. The rent was cheap, the internet spotty, and the nearest town thought a conservation biologist was a joke. My family's calls grew colder. Each voicemail ended with the same warning: "You'll never amount to anything." I ignored them because the betrayal at the lab had lit a fire that no ridicule could extinguish. My focus narrowed to one impossible notion: if I could listen to the forest, I could protect it. I began soldering cheap microphones into weather-proof housings, wiring them to solar-powered processors that would upload audio snippets to the cloud. Traditional scientists I emailed laughed. "Bioacoustic monitoring, that's hobbyist nonsense," one replied. Another wrote, "Stick to counting trees, not pretending you can hear endangered frogs." Their skepticism echoed my family's jeers, but I kept building, testing, failing, and rebuilding. Nights were spent in the station's drafty loft, listening to the crackle of rain on leaves while my code compiled, dreaming of a day when the forest would speak for itself. The arduous ascension and profound triumph months turned into years. My first prototype caught the call of a rare salamander species thought locally extinct. I uploaded the spectrogram to an open-access repository, and against all odds, a graduate student in Brazil recognized the pattern and confirmed the sighting. That tiny validation sparked a chain reaction. A small grant from an environmental NGO, then a partnership with a university's engineering department that helped me miniaturize the sensors. I deployed grids of them in a strip of strip-mined land in West Virginia, a place the locals called the Scar. For months, the recordings were just wind and distant traffic. Then, one dawn, the sensors picked up a chorus: wood thrushes, eastern whippoorwills, the high trill of a cerulean warbler. Species that had vanished decades ago were returning, drawn by the subtle rebirth of understory vegetation my acoustic data had helped guide. Word spread. Conservation agencies began requesting my kits. The technology, once mocked as fanciful, became a cornerstone of remote biodiversity monitoring. I watched barren hillsides turn into mosaics of green, heard the resurgence of life where silence had reigned, and saw my name attached to papers that now cited the very proposal Hale had stolen. Each success was a quiet rebuttal to the voices that had told me to quit. My family's messages, once sharp, grew quieter, still there but tinged with an unfamiliar hesitation. I never replied. I let the forest's voice answer for me. The cathartic return and poetic justice. 2 years after the first successful deployment, I received an invitation to speak at the annual town fair in my hometown, a request that arrived via the mayor's office, not my parents'. I accepted, not for accolades, but to let the land I'd left speak for itself. The fairgrounds buzzed with livestock shows and pie contests. I set up a modest booth, a solar panel-powered speaker, a laptop displaying live waveforms, and a few of the rugged sensors I'd built. As the afternoon waned, I invited the crowd to close their eyes and listen. I played a 10-minute loop harvested from the rehabilitated West Virginian site. The soft rustle of leaves, the distant call of a red-shouldered hawk, the unmistakable, bubbling song of a wood thrush, soundlessly vanished from our region. When I opened the file and let the sounds fill the air, a hush fell over the square. Old men who'd once dismissed my ambitions as tree-hugging fantasies leaned in, eyes wet. A woman in the back, my aunt, who had once told my mother I was wasting the family name, pressed a hand to her mouth, tears tracing lines down her cheeks. Then I saw them. My parents, standing near the edge of the crowd, their faces a mixture of shock and something I could barely name. Regret, maybe, or the dawning realization that the child they'd tried to steer away from a ridiculous dream had become the very thing that gave their town a reason to breathe easier. I stepped down from the booth and walked toward them. My mother's voice trembled as she whispered, "We thought we were protecting you." My father, usually stoic, placed a calloused hand on my shoulder and said, "We were wrong." I didn't need grand speeches. The proof was in the soundscape that now threaded through our hometown's hills, in the return of species we'd thought lost forever, in the way strangers approached me with gratitude instead of ridicule. As the fair lights flickered on, I turned to the crowd and said, "Listen, the forest never stopped speaking, we just forgot how to hear it. When we finally did, it gave us back more than we ever imagined." The applause that followed wasn't just for technology. It was for a belief that had survived betrayal, mockery, and years of solitary labor. The cathartic return and poetic justice continued. Walking home later that night along the familiar lane that led to my childhood house, I paused at the old oak where I used to sit and sketch animals in my notebook. I placed a single sensor on its bark, its tiny microphone already picking up the night's chorus, crickets, an owl's hoot, the faint rustle of a nocturnal mammal. I smiled, feeling the weight of every whispered doubt lift, replaced by a quiet certainty. Worth isn't measured by the approval of those who doubt you, but by the life you help flourish. I looked up at the stars, thinking of the proposal that had been stolen, the family that had called my dreams foolish, and the forest that had, against all odds, answered back. In that moment I understood the truest lesson. When you turn pain into purpose, the world doesn't just notice, it sings along. And that song, soft yet unyielding, is the kind of legacy no ridicule can ever erase.